Another team undergoing a change at the top. The March concern take a step back after 2 disastrous years, and the Ralph and McDonald management team take over. The team officially entered as Ram March, with a new chassis, the Ram March 01, penned by Dave Kelly. With Jochen Mass's Rothmans money gone, the cars look rather bare at the start of the season, with Loyal Rizzler the only holdover, and the team have adopted a sponsor-friendly white livery with a nice red-blue-green top half, and signed up Eliseo Salazar, who will be their only permanent entry, though they have also registered a second car, number 18, for anyone who wants to buy a drive. Salazar had started 1982 brightly with a decent 12th on the grid in Kyalami, but it wasn't to last, and as the season went on it became obvious that he was much slower than Winkelhock, and much more likely to end his race in a tyre wall or gravel trap. His most high-profile incident was the one with PK at Hockenheim. To be fair to Salazar, it was clear from early on that ATS's priority was Winkelhock, and Salazar was just there to bankroll the team, so perhaps becoming the focus of the March team might help, if they can finally get their act together. There had been much talk of Alfa Romeo pulling the plug throughout much of 1982, and indeed, over the winter, the parent organisation officially withdrew from Formula One competition, handing over the whole concern to Carlo Chiti's Euro Racing, who managed the team for Alfa Romeo in 1982. However, all ties are not entirely cut. Alfa Romeo will still be building the chassis, designed by Gérard Ducarouge, who moves across to the new structure, and also the engines. Marlboro Italia remain on board as major sponsor too, so the cars are visually the same as last year. The carbon fibre 183T chassis is an adaptation of last year's chassis for both the new regulations and the long-awaited Alfa Romeo 890T V8 turbo engine, which is rated 100 horsepower, 80 kilowatts higher than its V12 atmospheric predecessor, though it is reputed to be rather thirsty, meaning the team might want to be looking at making use of in-race refuelling. On driving duties, Andrea De Cesaris is retained, and in comes Mauro Baldi after his debut with Arrows in 1982. Arguably the most improved driver of 1982, De Cesaris had come on in leaps and bounds since his attempts to wreck a McLaren at every race in 1981. Pole in Long Beach and second on the grid in Detroit were followed by decent drives, though neither ultimately led to a result. De Cesaris might have his family connections at Marlboro Italia to thank for his seat, but had showed a speed and maturity on occasion that suggested there could be great things to come from this young driver if he can sort out his wild streak. Baldi's first season in Formula One with Arrows was difficult to judge, given the team's problems, particularly early on with the old car. Marc Sura was usually quicker than Baldi, but the Italian proved a reliable number 2 and a regular finisher, which is all a backmarker team can really expect from a rookie number 2 driver. The only question is whether he could be more than a simple, safe pair of hands if given the chance in a bigger team. 1982 had been a disastrous year for Ligier, both on and off track. Between political infighting and an unclear management structure, repeated delays to the promised Matra turbo engines, and the resultant failure of the JS19 car it had been designed for, the team had fallen from their race-winning heights of 1979 to 81 with a bit of a thud. And it had cost them. Drivers Jacques Lafitte and Eddie Cheever, team manager Jean-Pierre Jabouille, engine supplier Matra, and part owners and chief sponsors Talbot all deserted the team over the winter, though Guy Ligier's friendship with President Mitterrand saw the return of state-owned tobacco brand Gitane to the car. Rumours of Renault Turbo Power also came to naught, as did a reported offer of a brand new Honda Turbo, and the team will be powered by the Cosworth DFE, which sits in the new JS21 chassis. Designed by Hervé Gilpin and technical director Michel Beaujean, with aerodynamics by Henri Durand, the car is a substantial rebuild of the JS19, with almost no side pods at all but very large rear wings and a very obvious diffuser behind. In on driving duties come veteran Jean-Pierre Jarier and Brazilian Raul Bozel, whose Café do Brasil sponsors are also very visible on the car. The veteran French driver had been a mixed blessing for Azella in 1981 and 82. A solid driver and capable of putting in a good performance, but particularly after Paletti's accident, his commitment had seemed lacking and his driving had suffered accordingly. Jarier now had the Ligier drive he'd wanted in 1981, but would his commitment return, or would he find it difficult in a team that wouldn't necessarily mould itself around him in the way Azella had? It was difficult to assess Raoul Bozel's first year in F1 since it happened in the execrable March. While he was usually close to teammate Jochen Mass on pace, his inexperience told in races, though he rarely crashed, and like Mass, his season went downhill as the team slipped back into non-qualification. The jury is still out on whether Bozell has real talent or is just another well-heeled pay driver. Ferrari had had a traumatic year in 1982, to put it mildly, with the death of one star driver and severe injuries to the other. They could at least look back with a certain sense of satisfaction at achieving the Constructors' title against all the odds, and at the apparently inspired recruitment of Patrick Tambay. The 126C2 chassis is adapted once again by Harvey Postlethwaite, now the 126C2B, with a flat bottom and reduced side pods, and a truly enormous rear wing that reportedly provides at about 50% of the lost downforce, while the engineers have also squeezed a few more horses out of the engine. Patrick Tambay is retained in car 27 after his successful substitute drive there last year, and is joined by marquee signing René Arnoux, with a third car promised to Didier Pironi as soon as he's able to race. Patrick Tambay had started 1982, apparently finished with Formula One, stating he disliked the twitchy ground effect cars and that he was thoroughly fed up of the politics on display at Kyalami. However, when Enzo Ferrari calls, you listen, and Tambay agreed after testing the car to see out the season at Maranello, and despite missing a couple of races with a pinched nerve, acquitted himself well, taking his maiden win and finishing the season 7th from just 6 starts. Arnoux had been increasingly frustrated at Renault during 1982 by the team's increasingly blatant favouring of Prost, combined with a series of mechanical failures whenever he was in the ascendant. He also made some silly mistakes and seemed to lack Prost's feel for the car, and if there ever was a car that needed a driver with a feel, it was the RE30B. He was more or less openly feuding with his teammate and team by the second half of the season, so a fresh start at Ferrari could be just what he needs. The departure of Mauro Baldi coincided with that of chief sponsor Ragno, and the need over the winter to hastily rejig the already finished A5 chassis into the new A6. Unable to afford carbon fibre, Dave Wass has again designed a car with an aluminium honeycomb frame and the good old Cosworth DFV in the back. At least Mark Sierra has remained on board, with Chico Serra arriving from the defunct Fittipaldi team, but the car's plain white chassis tells you all you need to know about their financial situation. One intriguing rumour has linked Alan Jones with the seat, though. Apparently he was called by Enzo Ferrari to replace Pironi, but declined and Andretti drove instead. Now he's regretting it, is thinking about making a comeback, and apparently eyeing a pay drive with Arrows as a way to put himself back in the shop window. We'll see where, if anywhere, that goes. The Swiss driver had proved a good signing for Arrows in 1982, using his experience of wringing the best out of small resources gained with Theodore and others. Seldom spectacular, he nonetheless kept the car on the black bit and pointing the right way for the majority of the season, picking up points when others fell by the wayside. He and Jackie Oliver would hope that his maturity and smarts would stand them in good stead again. When the Fittipaldi team slimmed down to one car for 1982, Chico Serra, not Keke Rosberg, was the driver chosen to continue. Yes, that was due to his finances, but like Mark Sierra, he got the best out of a very bad car and put in a season's worth of solid, reliable drives to bring the car home as often as possible, and took home a single inherited point as a scant reward. Following 2 tragic deaths in his team during their first 2 years in the sport, Enzo Azzella spent much of the off-season contemplating withdrawing, but he was persuaded by friends to reconsider, and new sponsorship from Italian cosmetics firms Calemata helped them to expand to 2 cars again. Moreover, a deal was done with Alfa Romeo to use the V12 power units they'd been using in 1982, and now replaced with their new turbo engine. The handover of the Alfa Romeo team to Euroracing has wrapped things up in red tape somewhat, so in the meantime, the team continue with the good old Cosworth DFV. Piercarlo Ginzani returns to the cockpit after a short stint with the team in 1981, alongside debutant Corrado Fabi, younger brother of Tio, who'd gone off to drive in IndyCar after getting no offers in F1. Dragged along to watch his older brother Teo competing in ski racing, young Corrado Fabi wandered off and rented a go-kart for the afternoon and soon became smitten. By 14 he was driving for a factory karting team, and at 18 he moved straight into Italian Formula 3, where his results saw him move to European Formula 3 in 1980, partnering Michele Alboreto at Euroracing on his way to an overall third. In 1981 he drove for March while also studying aeronautics and tested with Brabham at the end of the year. No F1 drive materialised, so he spent another year in F2, winning the 1982 title, before being offered a drive at Ozella. The affable Italian had driven 2 races for Ozella in 1981 following Miguel Angel Guerra's accident, but had ultimately lost out to the better-funded and more experienced Jean-Pierre Jarier. Finding no drive for 1982, Ghinzani turned to sports cars, where he partnered Michele Alboreto at Lancia. This led to a test for Tyrrell at the start of 1983, but despite being quickest of all, Danny Sullivan got the drive. A consolation prize was full-time drive at Ozella. All change at Theodore, as Teddy Yip's team merged with Mo Nunn's Ensign outfit, bringing Nunn on board as team manager and also using Nigel Bennett's N183 chassis that was originally in development for Ensign. Yip had been instrumental in funding Ensign in the first place and had entered Ensign cars under the Theodore name back in 1977, so it seemed a logical move, but there are rumours that after 2 years of awful results, Yip is beginning to tire of pouring money into the team. Hopefully, if things go well, he may see a bit more return on his investment. Ensign driver Roberto Guerrero continues with the new setup, alongside Venezuelan motorcycle champion Johnny Cecotto. Despite gaining his seat by virtue of sponsorship rather than purely on merit, Guerrero acquitted himself well in his first F1 season. While the unreliability of the car prevented him from making the most of his debut, he proved a solid driver, especially when a switch from Avon to Michelin tyres benefited the car and saw him qualify in the top 20 more often than not. Mechanical problems meant he was only able to finish 1 race, but deserved much better and could be a man to look out for in decent equipment. Johnny Cecotto's father, an Italian immigrant, had raced motorbikes before retiring to run a Caracas garage, and his son soon followed him, impressing on a series of customer bikes before a Works Yamaha deal took him to the 1975 World 350cc Championship and the 750cc title in 1978. In 1981, Cecotto moved on to 4 wheels with a drive for Minardi Ferrari in Formula 2. At the end of the season, he was talking to Fittipaldi about moving up to F1, but they dropped to 1 car and it fell through, so he stayed in F2 for a further season, taking 2nd place to Corrado Fabi in the European Series before getting a drive with Theodore. Cecotto becomes Venezuela's first regular Formula 1 driver, following a one-off privateer entry by another Italian immigrant, Ettore Chimeri, in 1960. The Tolman-Hart-Warwick combination continues into its 3rd year, despite clear signs in 1982 that Warwick's talent was being wasted in the sluggish car. There were, however, equal signs that Tolman were finally beginning to get to grips with Formula 1, while Derrick's fine drive at the British Grand Prix may or may not have been a fluke or a marketing tactic, but the car was definitely becoming faster and more reliable, circulating in midfield instead of struggling to qualify. The TG182 had appeared at the end of 1982, ready for 1983, only to be junked when the new regulations appeared. Designer Rory Byrne has reworked it into the odd-looking TG183B, with an air intake under the front wing and a double-step rear wing. Alongside Warwick comes Bruno Giacomelli, replaced by Alfa Romeo after a lacklustre 1982, but an experienced test and development driver who can hopefully help the team continue to move forward. Battling Derek Warwick had come to public attention after his Brands Hatch heroics in 1982, and it was clear throughout the year that he was a much better racer than his car was allowing him to show. Rumours placed him at Williams or Renault for 1983, but he ended up staying put and leading the team into a 3rd season of F1. Testing times had been impressive, but how would he fare on race weekends? The perpetually cheerful Italian's laid-back attitude had maybe looked a little bit too much like indifference to his Alfa Romeo bosses in 1982, and in truth it was hard to tell a difference on the track. After De Cesaris's demolition derby year with McLaren, the way he dominated Giacomelli in 1982 made the latter look much worse in comparison. Washing up at Tolman, courtesy of Italian sponsors Candy, it seemed clear that he was really there to develop the car and support Warwick, and unless he can revive his reputation, his Formula 1 days might be numbered. When designer Gordon Coppock left McLaren at the end of 1980, following the merger with Ron Dennis's Project 4, he first went to March, then left in August 1980 to found his own F2 team, Spirit, alongside another ex-March man John Wickham. The pedigree of Coppock and Wickham attracted Honda, who were keen to get back into motorsport, and gave them their old 500cc motorbike team HQ in Slough as a base. With Honda's backing and sponsorship from Marlboro, the new team was seen as a serious contender straight away and attracted some of the best staff available, including ex-McLaren designer John Baldwin, who began work on the Spirit 201 chassis. Honda provided naturally aspirated V6 engines, but were also using the team as a testbed for their V6 turbo project, with which they hoped to enter Formula One. Spirit competed successfully in the 1982 European Formula 2 series, with Belgian driver Thierry Boutsen winning 3, coming second twice and third once to finish third in the overall standings, behind Corrado Fabi and Johnny Cecotto. Swede Stefan Johansson in the other car had less success, with just a single podium finish on his way to 8th overall. The team upgraded their chassis to F1 specs to house the new Honda Turbo, and first tested the combination in November. Honda were keen to keep it all on the down low, and the team made sure to test at tracks such as Willow Springs and Riverside in the US, rarely used by other F1 teams, and kept the timings to themselves. Eventually, however, it was decided to put in an entry for the 1983 F1 season, though only debuting later on. Of the two drivers, the team opted to sign up Stefan Johansson rather than Boutsen. The Belgian had made quite a stir in F2 and was regarded as a coming man, so didn't fit the low profile that Spirit Honda were trying to keep. Stefan's father was a successful touring car racer, and young Stefan started karting at the age of 12 before moving up to Formula Ford, where he won the Swedish title in 1977 and moved to the UK to contest the more prestigious British F3 series. After winning a race at Silverstone, the Shadow team offered him a Formula 1 drive, but after 2 failures to qualify he departed to go back to F3 and win the British title. 1981 saw a move to Tolman in Formula 2, where he beat Kenny Aitchison to the title at the last race of the season and moved to the Spirit Honda team for 1982, where he and Thierry Boutsen helped develop the F1 entrant as well as racing F2. His results were disappointing compared to Boutsen, but ironically that was what got him his second bite at F1.